Beneath a quiet city bridge, a mentally challenging black homeless father and his daughter survive by collecting bottles. He is judged, beaten, and constantly chased away. One day, while picking through trash near a bookstore, a group of kids accidentally started a fire. He risks his life to save a trapped boy, but is wrongfully arrested for arson. Only when the boy wakes up and tells the truth is everything revealed. He never knew the child was a billionaire's son, and their lives are about to change forever. On the east side of Brookhaven, just past the tall oaks and cracked sidewalks of Walker Park, a small gray tarp fluttered beneath the highway overpass like a forgotten flag. The city moved past it every day. Joggers with earbuds in, office workers on their morning commutes, moms pushing strollers with one hand and sipping lattes with the other. None of them looked twice. But inside that tent lived a man named Henry Fields and his daughter Lila. Henry was in his early 40s, though the lines on his face made him look older. His skin was deep brown and weathered by years under sun and rain. He wore a stained flannel shirt 2 sizes too big, sleeves frayed at the cuffs. His black hair was cropped short but uneven, like he'd done it himself with a pair of dull scissors. Henry didn't talk much. When he did, his words came slowly, carefully, like he was afraid they might fall apart if he rushed them. Some called him slow, others didn't call him anything at all, but to Lila he was just Daddy. Lila was 8 years old, all knees and elbows, with a gap-toothed smile and bright eyes that could cut through the thickest clouds. Her hair was in 2 poofy ponytails tied with mismatched pink ribbons. Her coat was thin for October and her shoes had holes in the soles, but she never complained, not once. Every morning she woke her father up with a soft tug on his sleeve and a whisper. "Daddy, it's morning. We got bottles to find." Henry would sit up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "Did you dream good last night?" She always nodded. "I dreamed about my pink dress. That dress was everything." Lila had seen one like it once in a shop window downtown. It was cotton candy pink, with little sparkles on the waist and a ribbon that tied in the back. She had pressed her nose to the glass and whispered, "That's the one." Henry had made a promise that day. "For your birthday, baby girl, I'm going to get you that dress. We'll dance in the park just like the fairy movies." Her 9th birthday was just 2 days away. They spent the mornings combing the neighborhood for recyclables. Henry carried the big bag slung over one shoulder while Lila pointed from the sidewalk. "There's a can, over by the trash bin." They had a rhythm, a quiet dance of survival that worked because it had to. Henry didn't take handouts, not because he was proud, but because he was scared of the looks that came with them, the suspicion, the way people clutched their purses tighter or crossed the street. They earned what little they had, 50 cents here, $1 there, just enough for bread, sometimes a banana. Henry never spent a dime on himself. Every quarter went into a dented cookie tin beneath Lila's blanket. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, the park was mostly empty. The air smelled of leaves and city dust. Lila sat on the grass with her knees pulled to her chest, humming a little tune. Henry sat beside her, chewing the inside of his cheek, counting the coins in his palm. He wasn't sure Lila noticed how quietly he sighed. She did. "You think we almost got enough?" she asked. Henry looked at her. His eyes were soft but tired. "Almost," he said. "Real close." She nodded like she believed it. Maybe she did. She pulled something from her pocket, a small broken mirror she'd found last week. She held it up and smiled into it. "When I wear the dress, I'm going to spin real fast like this," she said, twirling with arms outstretched. "And we'll dance. You promise you'll dance with me?" Henry chuckled, the sound raspy but full. "Ain't nobody gonna outdance me, girl." The laugh faded as he looked down at the tin. He was short. Maybe $2 short. That meant tomorrow, Saturday, was his last chance. He'd have to get up before the sun, hit every alley, every trash can in a 5-mile radius if he had to. He tucked Lila into their makeshift bed with care, brushing the dirt from her face with his sleeve. She clung to the old teddy bear someone had thrown away last year. It had one eye and no nose, but she loved it like it was new. As she drifted off, Henry sat outside the tent, knees pulled up to his chest, listening to the distant roar of traffic overhead. He wasn't a smart man, he knew that. He didn't know how to fix things or fill out forms or argue with people in uniforms. But he knew one thing. When he made a promise to Leela, he kept it. He looked at the stars, whispered to no one in particular. "Just a little more," he said. "Just need a little more." And with that he leaned back against the cold concrete wall, let the night settle in, and prayed morning would come with mercy. The sky was still a deep shade of navy when Henry stepped out from under the overpass. The city hadn't quite woken yet, just the occasional bus groaning down the main road and the hum of a street sweeper passing by like a ghost. He zipped up his worn jacket, slung the empty sack over his shoulder, and glanced back toward the tent where Lila still slept, curled up under the thin blanket. She looked peaceful. It gave him the strength to move his aching legs forward. He walked with a slight limp. His knees had been giving him trouble lately, too many miles, too little rest. But there was no time for pain. He had a mission. Today had to be the day he found enough bottles to buy that dress. He had promised, and Henry Fields did not break promises, not to her. His first stop was the alley behind the grocery store on Mason Avenue. He remembered seeing a recycling bin there last week that overflowed every Saturday morning, but when he rounded the corner he found it already emptied, nothing but wet cardboard and a banana peel. He stared at it for a long second, then shook his head, adjusted the sack, and moved on. As the sun broke the horizon, the city began to stir. Henry walked past the bus stop, where workers in collared shirts gathered with coffee cups and tired eyes. He avoided eye contact. He always did. They didn't see him anyway, not really. He was just part of the scenery, a shape to be stepped around. At the corner of 7th and Delmar, a security guard stood outside a gas station, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Henry didn't even make it to the recycling bin before the man stepped forward. "You don't belong here, keep moving." Henry stopped, opened his mouth, then shut it again. He raised both hands slowly and backed away, muttering, "Just looking for bottles, that's all." "Try somewhere else," the guard snapped. Henry turned and walked away. His cheeks burned, but not from the morning cold. He tried the residential streets next. Trash day had been Friday, so he thought maybe, just maybe, someone hadn't pulled their bins in yet. At a small blue house with flower pots on the porch, he spotted a clear bag filled with cans sitting beside the fence. His heart skipped. He walked over quietly, gently untied the bag, careful not to knock anything over. But just as he slung it over his shoulder, the front door creaked open. A middle-aged man in a bathrobe stepped out, frowning. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Henry froze. "Just bottles. I wasn't taking nothing else." "That's private property. Get the hell off my lawn before I call the cops." "I didn't mean nothing bad," Henry said softly, already backing away. But the man wasn't done. "You people, always stealing, always lurking around." Henry's hands trembled. He dropped the bag, nodded quickly, and turned to leave. He made it 2 blocks before a car screeched to a stop in front of him. 3 teenage boys in hoodies jumped out. They looked no older than 16. One of them tossed a soda can at Henry's chest. "Hey, trash man, you missed a spot." Henry flinched as the can hit him. He tried to walk around them, but one stepped in his path. "Are you going, huh? You smell like piss, man." The second boy shoved Henry's shoulder. Not hard, not yet, but enough. Henry raised his arms in defense, voice cracking. "I ain't bothering nobody. I'm just trying to—" The punch came fast, straight to his stomach. He bent over, wheezing. Another kick caught him in the ribs. He didn't fight back. He never did. He just dropped to his knees and covered his head with both hands, rocking slightly, letting out a low whimper that wasn't quite a cry, wasn't quite a scream. It was the sound of someone trying to disappear. Eventually, the boys lost interest. One spat near his foot, another laughed and said, "Go crawl back under your bridge, freak." They drove off, music blaring. Henry stayed on the ground for a long moment, shaking. Then, Slowly he sat up. His lip was bleeding, one eye already swelling, but he reached for his sack, now ripped along one seam, and began stuffing the few bottles that had spilled back inside. He limped forward. His ribs hurt with every breath, but he kept going. By late morning he had made it halfway downtown. The sidewalks were busier now. Shoppers with their bags, college students sipping smoothies, tourists snapping photos of murals they didn't understand. Henry walked along the curb, eyes scanning trash bins, his sack growing heavier with each find. And then he saw it. A group of kids laughing and running in circles near the old corner bookstore. It was one of the few places left in the city that still sold second-hand novels, dusty hardbacks and yellowed paperbacks that smelled like forgotten time. The shopkeeper, an old man with thick glasses, stood just inside the open door, too busy rearranging shelves to notice the commotion outside. The kids, 3 of them, maybe 9 or 10 years old, were crouched beside the wooden steps, striking match after match from a worn box of paper matches. Each time a flame burst, they squealed, then dropped the match to watch it sizzle out. One boy tossed a match toward the edge of the building. Henry stopped in his tracks. He stepped closer, watching the tiny flare hit a dry leaf and smolder. When the flame fizzled, he let out a breath. Then he spotted the empty matchbox and bent down to pick it up. Maybe the cardboard could be sold with the rest of his recycling. He held it up, squinting at the label. Then he heard it, a faint crack, followed by a whoosh. He turned. Behind the open bookstore door, smoke curled up from a corner shelf where someone had left a pile of books too close to a space heater. The flame was small but fast. A child's scream echoed inside. Henry's heart stopped. Before anyone else even noticed, he dropped the matchbox and ran toward the smoke. The smoke was growing darker, crawling across the inside of the bookstore like fingers searching for something to consume. Henry rushed forward, waving his arms and shouting at the people nearby, but no one listened. A woman pushing a stroller glanced his way and pulled her child closer. A man in a business suit gave him a wide berth without breaking stride. Henry kept yelling, his voice cracking with panic. "There's a kid inside! Somebody help! Fire!" Still, nothing. They didn't see him. Or worse, they saw him and chose to look through him. His clothes were filthy, his face bruised, and his sack of bottles slung across his back like a burden he couldn't drop. People assumed the worst, as always, that he was high, that he was yelling nonsense, that whatever trouble was happening, he was the cause, not the witness. He turned back toward the store. The smoke was thick now, pressing against the glass window like breath on cold glass. Inside, a small boy was crouched near a fallen shelf, his hands covering his head, his tiny frame shaking with each cough. The flame had caught a curtain now. It climbed upward, greedy and fast. Henry's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He shouted again, louder this time, "Please! He's gonna die in there!" A man walking by frowned and muttered, "Crazy bastard," before brushing past and bumping Henry's shoulder. The contact snapped something inside him. Henry stopped shouting. He clenched his jaw, dropped his sack to the ground, and ran straight through the door. Inside, the heat hit him like a wall. Smoke clawed at his eyes and throat, making each breath a fight. He dropped to his knees and crawled beneath the growing haze, calling out softly, "Hey, buddy, it's okay, I'm coming." He saw the boy then, pinned under the edge of a heavy wooden shelf, face smeared with soot, tears carving clean lines down his cheeks. The child wasn't screaming anymore. He was barely breathing. Henry scrambled forward and tried to lift the shelf, but it was too heavy. His hands, already raw from the earlier beating, slipped on the scorched wood. He coughed hard, lungs burning, then wrapped both arms under the boy and pulled. The shelf didn't move much, but just enough. Enough for the boy to wiggle out, gasping. Henry scooped him up, one arm under the boy's legs, the other around his back. The boy clung to his neck instinctively, his small hands digging into Henry's tattered collar. The heat was unbearable now. Flames crackled nearby, licking the floorboards. Henry stumbled, vision blurring, but kept going. As he reached the threshold, someone finally noticed. A woman across the street screamed. A man shouted, "Someone's still inside!" Henry emerged through the doorway, coughing, his jacket smoldering. He dropped to his knees on the sidewalk, still holding the boy tight against his chest. The child was crying now, loud and alive. A moment later, sirens wailed in the distance. People began to gather, phones up, recording, talking over each other. The shopkeeper rushed out, babbling about insurance and how it wasn't his fault. Firefighters pushed through the crowd. A woman knelt beside Henry and tried to take the boy, but he didn't let go until he saw the boy's chest rise and fall on his own. Then came the police. 2 officers approached, one already reaching for his cuffs. Henry looked up, dazed, cheeks streaked with ash. "You, stand up. Hands where I can see him." Henry blinked, confused. "No, I saved him." "I didn't." "You were seen running from the store with this," one officer said, lifting the empty matchbox from the sidewalk. "That yours?" "I picked it up. I thought—" "You set the fire?" No, there were kids, matches. Please, I didn't." "Turn around." Henry hesitated, holding up his blistered hands. "Please." "My daughter, she's waiting for me. She's all alone." The officers didn't care. They forced him onto his stomach, yanking his arms behind his back and clicking the cuffs tight. Henry let out a choked cry, not from pain but from fear, not for himself, for Lila. "Don't take me," he whispered. "She's waiting. I gotta get back." "Right," one officer muttered. "Another junkie with a story." As they pulled him to his feet, the boy he had saved was already being loaded into the back of an ambulance, his small body wrapped in a blanket, eyes shut. No one heard Henry's voice over the noise. No one asked what happened. No one saw the burn marks on his hands or the blood on his lip. To them, he was the problem. They shoved him into the back of the patrol car. As the door slammed shut, Henry pressed his forehead to the glass and whispered again, "Lila." Across town, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across Walker Park. The tarp beneath the bridge rustled in the wind. Inside, Lila sat alone, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the fading light. The cookie tin was still under her blanket. The coins inside hadn't moved. She waited, just like every other night. But this time, her daddy didn't come back. And outside the police station, as Henry sat alone in a holding cell with blistered palms and dried blood on his shirt, he pressed his eyes shut and saw her face. Not scared, not angry, just waiting, trusting he would keep his promise. But he was locked behind cold steel, labeled a criminal, left to sleep on concrete while the city outside went back to pretending he didn't exist. The lights in the police station flickered overhead, humming faintly, casting a pale glow over the narrow holding cell. Henry sat on the edge of the hard bench, hands resting in his lap, wrists red and raw from the handcuffs they had finally removed. His palms still stung, the skin blistered and tight, but he didn't seem to feel it anymore. His eyes stared ahead, dull, distant, as if they were fixed on something far beyond the concrete wall in front of him. Layla. Every few minutes he whispered her name under his breath, just to keep the sound of it alive in his chest. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. He had no idea what time it was anymore. All he knew was that she was out there, alone, probably scared, maybe cold. And he wasn't. A younger officer walked by his cell, glanced in, then looked away quickly. Henry didn't bother speaking. They had already asked their questions. They didn't want his answers. He tried to tell them again and again. He saw the fire, he tried to help, the boy was trapped, the matches weren't his. But none of it mattered. The story had already been written before they ever cuffed him. Across town, the boy Henry had carried out of the flames lay in a hospital bed on the 4th floor of St. Jude's Medical Center. His name was Oliver Whitmore, age 7, son of David Whitmore, real estate magnate, philanthropist, and one of the wealthiest men in the state. The boy was bruised, with light burns on his arms and smoke still clinging to his lungs, but he was alive. And slowly, he was waking up. The nurse leaned over gently. "Can you hear me, sweetheart?" Oliver blinked, then nodded. "Do you know your name?" He rasped it out, voice small but steady. "Oliver." The nurse smiled. "Good job. Do you remember what happened?" He paused, His hands tightened slightly around the edges of the blanket. Then he nodded again. "There was fire, the shelf fell, I couldn't move." She leaned in. "And who helped you, honey? Do you remember who got you out?" The boy's eyes widened slightly, suddenly sharper. "Yes, he was dirty, people yelled at him, but he pulled me out. He said it was okay, he wasn't scary." The nurse exchanged a glance with the attending doctor. She smiled again. "Can you tell us what he looked like?" Oliver squinted, struggling. "He had a rip in his coat, and a cut on his face. He coughed a lot, but he held me like Daddy does." The nurse stood up straight, brows knitting. "Do you think he started the fire?" "No," the boy said, with more force now. "The fire came from the back. My friends were playing with matches. They dropped one. I told them not to, but they ran." The doctor stepped out of the room and called the hospital administrator. Within 20 minutes the statement was passed along, another 20, and a city lawyer was already en route to the station. Back in the cell, Henry sat motionless, until he heard the first voice that didn't sound like a threat. "Mr. Fields?" a woman asked. She was standing outside his cell, dressed in a navy blue coat with a badge clipped to her belt. Her tone was different, measured, not cold. He stood slowly, unsure. "Yes?" "My name's Lauren Sanchez. I work with the city's public interest legal unit. We've just received an official statement from the child you rescued." Henry blinked, heart stumbling. The boy said, "You saved his life. He said you pulled him from the fire." His lips parted. "He did?" "He also made it very clear that you didn't start anything, that the fire was caused by his friends and that you were the only one who tried to help." Henry felt the weight in his chest shift, slightly, cautiously, as if hope was something he wasn't quite ready to hold. "So I can go?" he asked, barely above a whisper. The woman's eyes softened. "Yes, you can go." 2 officers returned with keys and opened the cell. One of them, the older one who'd arrested him, avoided Henry's gaze. The other gave him a nod, as if that made up for everything. As Henry stepped out, the ache in his body hit him all at once. But he didn't care. He was already thinking of the park, the tarp, the cold ground beneath the bridge, and the small figure who might still be sitting there, waiting. He walked. The sky had darkened to purple, city lights flickering on one by one. His legs burned, but he kept going, weaving through alleys and across intersections like a man driven by something deeper than instinct, by promise, by love, by sheer need to be seen again, by the only person who ever truly saw him. When he reached the park, his chest felt tight, not from pain but from fear. What if she was gone? What if something had happened? But then he saw her. Lila was curled up near the foot of the tent, arms wrapped around her knees, head resting on her teddy bear. Her coat was still zipped to the top, but she was shivering. Her eyes were closed. Henry knelt down slowly and touched her shoulder. "Lila." She stirred, then jolted awake. When she saw him, her face froze for half a second, as if she couldn't believe it. Then her arms shot around his neck, her tiny body pressing into his chest with all the strength she had. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you I would," he said, voice cracking. "I'm sorry I was late." She pulled back and looked at his face, saw the bruises, the burns, the exhaustion. But she didn't ask what happened. Instead, she smiled and said softly, "Tomorrow's my birthday." He nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek with his knuckle. "We still got time." That night, they didn't sleep much. They just held each other, breathing slow and steady beneath the hum of passing cars above. The world hadn't changed, but something had shifted. And somewhere, far away, a wealthy man was staring at a phone call from the hospital, one that would change his path and Henry's forever. But that, too, would come in time. For now all that mattered was that she wasn't alone, and neither was he. The sun rose slow and quiet, casting long, soft light across the park grass and the cracked concrete under the bridge. A gentle breeze moved the flap of the tarp like it was breathing. Henry sat with his knees pulled up, arms wrapped tight around them. His eyes were red and swollen, not from sleep, but from thinking too much. Leela sat beside him, eating a small piece of bread she had saved from the night before. She didn't say much, just stayed close. Henry opened the cookie tin again and poured the coins into his palm. He counted under his breath, tapping each coin with his finger. "I'm 2, 2, and a quarter. No, wait." He stopped, shook the tin, counted again. I ain't got enough," he mumbled. Lila looked over. "It's okay, Daddy." Henry blinked fast, staring at the coins. "I said I get it. I told you I said I would. I tried real hard." "I know," she said, touching his arm. "You tried a lot." I was gonna get the pink one," he said, voice shaking. "The one with the shiny bow. I seen it. You liked it." Lila nodded slowly. "I did. But it's okay. We didn't get it. We can try next year." Henry looked at her with his mouth slightly open. You ain't mad?" She smiled softly. "No, Daddy, you came back. That's what matters." Henry pressed his forehead against her shoulder, and she let him rest there. For a long time they just sat like that. The coins lay scattered on the dirt between them. A few rolled out of the tin, but neither of them moved to pick them up. Then footsteps came down the hill. Henry looked up, squinting at the morning sun. A man in a long dark coat and a small boy were walking toward them. The boy had blonde hair and wore a thick green jacket. Henry blinked a few times, confused. The boy looked familiar. "Mr. Fields?" the man asked. Henry stood up, slow, his hand holding Lila's. That's me," the man gave a small nod. "I'm David Whitmore. This is my son Oliver. You helped him yesterday." Henry looked at the boy. Oliver smiled and waved. I did?" Henry asked. He got out okay?" David nodded. "Thanks to you." Henry smiled, then frowned quick after. They said I did something bad, I know. But Oliver told the truth," David said. "And now we know too." Henry looked down. "I didn't want to hurt nobody. I just seen him. He was stuck. I had to go." "I believe you," David said, "and I want to thank you properly." "You and your daughter?" Lila looked up. "Hi." David smiled at her. "Hi there. What's your name?" "Lila." "Well, Lila, I have a big house, a safe place, and I was wondering, would you two like to come stay for a while?" Henry blinked. "Like, at your house? A real one?" David nodded. "Yes, just for a while. Warm food, soft bed, school if you want." Henry looked down at Lila. You want to go?" She squeezed his hand. "Maybe we try." Henry nodded slowly, then looked back at David. "We can. Try. I think we can." The ride to the house was quiet. Lila held her father's hand the whole time. Henry kept looking out the window like he wasn't sure if it was all real. The driveway curved through a gate and opened up to a wide lawn and a tall house with big windows and stone walls. It looked like a place from one of the books they used to look at through store windows. Inside, everything smelled clean. A lady smiled and showed them to a guest room with warm lights and folded towels. Henry ran his hand over the blanket. It's soft." "That's right," the lady said kindly. That evening, David sat with Henry in the kitchen. Oliver was coloring at the table nearby. Henry fidgeted with a spoon, unsure what to do with it. "I didn't know it was your daughter's birthday today," David said. Henry blinked. "Huh?" Lila told Oliver. Henry looked around, nervous. I was trying to get her a dress, the pink one, with the shiny stuff on it. I tried, but I couldn't do it." David nodded slowly. "She said you tried real hard." Henry looked down at his hands. "I was gonna dance with her in the park. I promised." "She still wants to," David said softly. Then he stood and walked into the hallway. A few minutes later, a lady returned with a white box in her arms. She set it down in front of Lila. She looked at Henry. "Can I open it?" Henry nodded. "Go on, baby girl." Lila untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Her eyes lit up. Inside was the pink dress, soft fabric, sparkly belt, and a ribbon in the back. She gasped. It's the one. Henry covered his mouth with both hands. That's the one from the store. David stood in the doorway, smiling. I didn't know. But I'm glad I do now. Lila looked at her father. Can I wear it tomorrow? Henry nodded fast. Yes, baby. You twirl all you want. The next morning, in Walker Park, the wind was light and the sky was blue. Lila stood in the grass, spinning in her new dress, her arms wide. She laughed out loud as the skirt floated around her. Henry stood nearby, smiling big, his fingers twitching like he wasn't sure what to do next. Then she held out her hand. Dance with me, Daddy. He looked around, then stepped forward slowly. I don't know how to do it right, he said shyly. You don't have to, she smiled. So he took her hand. And they danced. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.